The team knows. Okay. No, but this is kind of. Okay, shall we start? 10 seconds. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me loud and clear in the room and online. Thanks a lot for joining both in the room and online. This is Stelios Grafakos, Principal Economist at the Center for Thought Leadership. And it's a great pleasure and honor to moderate this session on moving from climate planning to financing and implementation. As we approach COP30, the completion of the NDC 3.0 cycle marks an important milestone in advancing global climate ambition. Across the world, countries have been updating their plans, their targets, aligning them with the long-term emission development strategies to chart the pathways towards low-carbon and climate-resilient future. At GGGI, we have had the privilege of supporting around 30 member and partner countries in enhancing their NDCs, developing their LTLEDs, around 17 countries developing their NAPs, and today's session is an opportunity to reflect on those and see what comes next. Our discussion, therefore, moves beyond submissions and plans, translating ambition into finance and implementation. We know that while climate plans are enhanced, are integrated, more sophisticated, still financing remains a serious and persistent bottleneck. The gap between required finance and available finance is huge, and we're going to listen that in more details by our distinguished speakers. Bridging this gap demands new models, innovative tools, stronger alignment between climate policy, macroeconomic planning, but also investment strategies. So today we'll delve into these next steps, looking at how NDCs and LTLEDs can serve as a foundation for climate finance planning, and how different tools, instruments, and frameworks can help countries identify financing needs, mobilize resources, and more decisively move into implementation while learning from countries' experiences. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Ambassador Jenny Kim, who is going to provide us the opening remarks. It's a great pleasure and honor having Ambassador Kim with us, who is the CEO of the Global Industry Hub, where she leads global initiatives that empower philanthropy with the knowledge, partnerships, and tools needed to accelerate climate progress towards a sustainable and equitable future. Prior to this role, Ambassador Kim served as an ambassador and deputy minister for climate change at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, where she acted as the country's chief negotiator and head of delegation to the UNFCCC and various bilateral and multilateral negotiations on climate and green growth. Before joining the ministry, as many of you know, she was the deputy director of GSGI. It's a great honor having Ambassador Kim. The floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Stelios. It is such a great pleasure to be back to my old home. Yes, and the Minister Al-Sada from Qatar. Yeah, thank you very much. And also very glad to see you here again. So distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, it is a true honor to stand before you today as we mark the 10th anniversary of Paris Agreement this year. A decade since the world came together around a shared vision to limit global warming, safeguard our planet, and secure a sustainable future for generations to come. So when we look back last 10 years, countries have demonstrated tremendous ambition. Nationally determined contribution, NDC, have become the backbone of our collective climate efforts. They represent goals, commitments, and pathways towards a low-carbon, climate-resilient world. But as we all know, a plan is only as powerful as its implementation. So plan exists for implementation. And implementation requires one thing, above all else, that's finance. So when we talk about NDC, immediately after we will talk about how to implement. And then regarding the question how to implement, we all say finance, finance, finance. That's why this session is so critical. The implementation is where the real beauty and the real challenge of Paris Agreement lies, as I mentioned. It is in solar panels installed in rural communities. It is in the resilient crops growing in drought-prone regions. And also it is the clean transport system transforming our cities. But anyway, because the finance is so clear, we all remember that at COP29 in Baku last year, actually the global community agreed to mobilize $1.3 trillion annually in climate finance. But we all know that this amount of money cannot be mobilized by only governments, by only public money. That's why we need many different players to join contributing this climate finance. So I believe public finance is the foundation. So public finance, government budget, climate funds, and bilateral official development assistance provides the foundation. And multilateral development banks, MDBs, they are the catalysts. So MDBs must go beyond traditional lending. They should become risk takers and not just risk managers. And then philanthropy, such as my organization. We must be a connector, and we must be a first comer. So philanthropy, while smaller in scale, has a unique and vital role because philanthropy money, it can be generous and can be like patient. And private sector money. Private sector money is the engine of scale. Once public money, philanthropy money, MDBs gather together and start, then private sector finance can scale up. That's why I believe the partnership is the glue. So all these different players must be connected and collaborated together through the glue of partnership. So at this session, I do believe we are going to discuss roles of different players representing different sectors, but at the same time, we will discuss how to come up with very strong glue connecting those players. So people say finance is not just about money. Finance is the matter of trust. As I mentioned, if the different players, they build trust together, they will collaborate, and they can produce bigger results, bigger synergy. So trust building among different players in climate finance is crucial. And then we need a good arranger, a good facilitator, a good mediator to bring all these different players to the table. And I'm sure that Global Green Growth Institute finance team is playing that role, so congratulations. And then I hope we are going to have wonderful discussion this session. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ambassador Kim, for the opening remarks and setting the scene and providing in a nutshell what is needed really to move from planning to implementation through finance and creating these important partnerships. So let's delve into the issue. We have two parts of this session. In the first part, we're going to listen some insights from different organizations on the updates with regard to the NDCs. So we're going to listen from Mr. Ventura Silva from UNFCCC. We'll get also some policy insights on a recent analysis that was conducted by the OECD, by Chiara Falduto, who is going to share those insights and also recommendations how we move from NDCs to finance. And lastly, we will have a presentation from two colleagues from GGI, Diana Quesada and Basil Oberholzer, who are going to give us an update of the work that GGI has been doing on supporting NDC enhancement and also present an upcoming publication on a guide on macroeconomic and finance analysis for climate planning. So I guess we have the first intervention by Ventura Silva online. While we are getting the first speaker online, I would like to give his profile. So Ventura Silva has over 17 years of experience advancing climate action across diverse regions worldwide. He currently heads the UNFCCC Regional Collaboration Center for the Caribbean, where he plays a key role in strengthening regional collaboration on climate change. He supports countries in enhancing transparency, scaling up mitigation efforts, and mobilizing climate finance. So Is Ventura Silva online? Yes.
Stelios, can you confirm if you can hear me? Stelios, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Great.
From the room?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
I understand that you would be moving the slides from your side, right? Since I see the screen already on.
That's fine. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good afternoon to all of you. Greetings from Bonn. And just to update, I lead the NDC and LT-LEDs work from the UNFCCC Secretariat on the technical support side. And thank you very much for this invitation to share with you from the UNFCCC what we are focusing on in terms of financing the NDCs, which is very critical at this moment, as this is in a phase of implementation, where the focus, as was mentioned by the ambassador before, is about getting the necessary means of implementation, mainly finance, to accelerate implementation for the countries. Can we move to the next slide, please? Would it be possible to move to the next slide, please? So while we're there,
Okay.
what we are looking at is how much finance it would take or investment it would take to implement these NDCs. So that would be where we would basically start from. And in order to know what it is required. As you know, we are in different stages of NDCs. We have the existing round of NDCs up to 2030 that you would have observed previously, and now we have the new round of NDCs that came in this year that are having also 2035 targets. But as you know, as informed by the science, perfect. As informed by the science, we need to, if we are to ensure that we are going to be on track for 1.5 or 2 degree target, then we need to have expedited action taken on this decade, that's by 2030, so that we come closer or we are on track for achieving those long-term goals of the Paris Agreement on a most economical manner. So during the NCQG process, we've seen the NDR reports that estimated the need for implementation of NDCs as 5.1 to 6.8 trillion up to 2030. That is for this the NDCs that were communicated up to 2030. But a caveat is that this information that came out in 30 June only covered 98 parties' communications. And where we had at that time around 142 NDCs communicating up to 2030. So it was only a fraction of the, or around half of the roughly measures that were covered. So you see on the graph here on the right, what was covered in the green, the lighter green circle, which was only what accounted for 5.1 to 6.8 trillion, where what was not covered, you would see about up to 142 parties with 5,760 measures, which was not covered in this figure. So it's also important to understand now we have the NDC that was submitted after this date, even counting up to 2030 with 2030 targets. And also we don't account for this estimation that went into the NCQG, the current round of NDCs that are submitted with 2035 targets or updated 2030 targets. So taking this into mind, like what 5.1 to 6.8 trillion was a rough estimation that went into the NC calculation. So the result of NCQG was, the next slide, please. It was requested in the NCQG decision that came out last year in Baku to support developing country parties, with developed countries taking the lead. There needs to be at least US $300 billion mobilized per year by 2035. And similarly, this is not enough. So it has to be scaling up this financing from all sources to developing countries for climate action up to 1.3, at least 1.3 trillion per year by 2035. And this includes, as was mentioned by them, not only limited to the public sector finance, but also the private sector sources and other sources of finance that is needed for scaling up to the minimum 1.3 trillion per year that is needed by 2035. That was in the NCQG decision. So how well will that result in things being implemented? To look at that, next slide, please. So to look at that, we look at the environment in which it has to be. So the NDCs, we see most of the NDCs that were submitted in this latest round in 2025, including elements around what would enable implementation. So some of them do have costing elements of the NDC, whereas some indicate other policy cohesion within the national system. So we see that the NDCs are more and more being whole of government, whole of society. NDCs is encompassing the different segments in the country. So this enabling environment at national level is important. This is supporting the NDC investment plans, NDC implementation plans could support these further actions. And it is important to remember that there is no one size fit all when it comes to implementing NDCs and the support for implementation of the NDCs. Then there is the element of mobilizing the finance and also the partnerships. This is where it is important role of organizations such as DGGI, as again, Ambassador also referred to this in her previous intervention in the opening remarks. And also then mobilizing the finance that is required to the scale, so 300 billion and 1.3 trillion by 2035, but escalating. The importance is to realize that action needs to happen now, because the 2030, what we achieve is important. In 2028, we will have the next round of Global Stocktake, which will tell us where we are progressing collectively in terms of implementation of the Paris Agreement. And the 2030 target will give a strong signal. If implementation is lagging behind, we will, the 2040, when we have in 2030 to determine the next round of NDCs, a lot of the countries will be hesitant because we see very slow progress till now. So it is important that the finance is mobilized, but also from the countryside, it's important the access to these resources, including finance, but the technology and other capacity building is enabled, so the countries actually can access them. Now, there is also this discussion about the importance of critical nature of the grants, funds for the NDC implementation, but it is also being realized that it is not just depending on the public finance, not just the grants that is coming from these various sources, but also there is need to mobilize innovative finance, including the private sector engagement in the implementation if we are to achieve these NDCs. So in order to do that, what needs to be the enabling environment that needs to be created at national level? It's important to take to focus on these enablers that would actually enhance attraction of finance, technology, and capacity building for the NDC implementation, both at national level, but also while reaching out to the international organizations as well as the other bilateral support organizations. So given this message, I would like to see where we are in this new round of NDCs. The next slide, please. We have currently 63 NDCs submitted for the 2025 round of NDCs, which represents roughly around 30% of the countries, 30% of the population, and 30% of the overall global emissions that are covered. We heard during the SG special event that was held in September that we would have around close to 100 to 120 new NDCs that would be submitted by or during COP. So that would almost take us to about 60% cumulatively of the overall the parties to the Paris Agreement, as well as the coverage on population and global emissions. So we hope that there are a lot more NDCs to be submitted in this round, and we know there has been a push from the Secretary General and all the support from the UN organizations as well as other organizations such as GGGI that is configured towards supporting the NDC preparation. But we are also in a phase where we are also simultaneously planning for collectively working towards supporting NDC implementation, because this is, as I mentioned, the need of the hour. There's going to be increased messaging that is going to be coming from this COP, coming from the synthesis report, to the need to focus on accelerating implementation, and that would be the focus. And to the next slide, please. To look at one other instrument within the Paris Agreement that is providing long-term vision, that is the long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies. We heard from Stelios that GGI is also involved in supporting development of NDCs as well as the long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies, or LT-LEDs. Currently, we have up to around 79 parties that have submitted their LT-LEDs, and there are more LT-LEDs that are being in process of being developed. Countries are increasingly realizing that this is important to give a long-term signal for the financing institutions, such as the MDBs, who look at the requirements of the country on a longer horizon through what is being given in the LT-LEDs. So this is, they consider it more stable, and that gives a good signal to understand what the consecutive round of NDCs would be indicating, where the long-term trajectory would be at national level. And also this is a signal giving predictability for investments for both the private sector as well as the technology suppliers, for example, in terms of the requirements of the countries on a longer term time horizon. And hence there is an emphasized focus on the importance of these long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies, although they are voluntary in nature under the Paris Agreement. The importance it serves in terms of attracting finance, attracting technology, attracting investments from other actors, giving a long-term stable signal of where the demand is going to come from. So it is that plays a crucial role in this whole cycle of the consecutive NDCs that are to come in the country, as well as the vision of the country in achieving the targets that are set for achieving or mitigating climate change, but also for an adaptation and resilience, but also how that is linked with the sustainable development priorities of the country. So that gives a strong signal in terms of where the countries are heading, and then that we see that more countries are taking up this exercise to come up with what the long-term strategies are going to be, providing the nexus on climate and the development goals of the countries. So with that background, I would like to hand back over to Stelios, and hope you have a successful event. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Silva, for providing us some updates from the NDC submissions of countries. Still many NDCs to be submitted before the COP, and it's great to hear that NDC 3.0, an observation from UNFCCC is that they provide an enabling environment which is important to attract investments and mobilize finance, and also your emphasis on setting and creating the right partnerships, as Ambassador Kim also mentioned before, in order to mobilize the necessary finance. And clearly we see the needs that you highlighted, 1.3 trillion per year. So this is really huge. And also given the gap, I think all these elements are very important, along with the long-term mission development strategies you mentioned, to give to investors clear policy signals for long-term to mobilize finance. Then let's move to insights from OECD related work from Mrs. Chiara Falduto, who is a policy analyst at OECD, and she leads a flagship work streams on climate finance. She provides strategic analysis and policy guidance to help governments mobilize and scale up public and private investments for climate action in developing countries, ensuring alignment with Paris Agreement goals. Previously, she served as a special advisor to the Director and Deputy Director of OECD Environment Directorate, playing a key role in shaping the Directorate's strategic direction. Yes, Chiara, over to you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Can you hear me well? Can you confirm?
Yes, loud and clear.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thanks very much to GCGI, especially for the invitation to participate in this event. It's really a pleasure to be here, although online and not in person, unfortunately. So I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time today to share some findings and key messages from a report that OECD has been working on in the first half of this year, together with UNDP. And it's a report that you have in front of you in the slide, Investing in Climate for Growth and Development, the case for enhanced NDCs. And in this report, what we tried to do was, first of all, to do some economic modeling to really show why putting forward enhanced NDCs makes economic sense. And this type of message is particularly important, especially this year. We heard, as we heard from Vintura just a few minutes ago, given that 2025 was the year where countries were supposed to put forward a new cycle of NDCs. What also we do in the report, and which is what I will focus the most in today's presentation, is also make the case that not only putting forward enhanced NDCs is important, but it's equally important to back them with very strong and structured financing strategies to make sure that whatever is put forward in terms of targets can also then be implemented. So I will start with a few, if I can get to the next slide, please. I will start by showing some of the key findings from the first part of the report that I mentioned, which is the economic modeling part that shows how enhanced NDCs can have a positive overall impact on the global economy. And one of our headline findings is that enhanced NDCs will contribute to GDP growth over the long term. And by 2040, we can see a 0.21% increase in global in global GDP as a result from enhanced climate action. 0.21% might not seem like a lot, but it would be the equivalent of adding the economy of Sweden to the global economy. And above all, what it really tells us, what this figure really tells us, is that at least climate action is not at all does not at all hurt growth over the long term, which is something that a lot of governments, especially in today's geopolitical context where there are many other different priorities that countries are turning to, it's really important to stress this message that climate action in the long term will not hurt economic growth or the well-being of the global economy. Can we move to the next slide, please? Another headline message that our report shows is that if we were to factor in avoided climate damages, the increase in global GDP or the benefits in terms of global GDPs would be even higher, and we would be looking at a 13% increase in global GDP by 2100, which is again showing how much climate action is a very important investment in the long term. Can I get to the next slide, please? Another very important message that the first part of the report tries to convey is that it's not only about the size or the levels of growth, but also the quality of growth that enhanced climate action can lead to. We collaborated on this report with UNDP, who also did some modeling regarding to how enhanced climate action can also impact and accelerate the achievement of SDGs. You have a few examples there in front of you in the graph on the right. And above all, we see that enhanced climate action can have a huge impact on poverty reduction in developing countries, where we see that by 2050, integrating climate action with SDG policies could lift 1 in 5 people out of extreme poverty. Beyond that, we also did some modeling that related to job creation and enhanced energy security, and we see very important benefits on all these areas in all over the world in different countries. Again, I just wanted to talk about some of the key numbers and key messages, but I really invite you to read the first part of the report to get a more granular understanding of how enhanced NDCs will impact positively the global economy. Can I get to the next slide, please? Thank you. So now moving to the second part of the presentation, which is more about how to make sure that all these benefits that we have seen can be reaped and can be really turned into action and into reality. And so in the second part of the report, we try to do, first of all, try to understand what does it take for NDCs to actually be implementable and be investable. And we did an analysis of all the NDCs that had been put forward by then, so by June of this year, and try to understand what are some key characteristics that they should really have to be in order to be implementable. And we find 3 key elements, which are the ones that you see in front of you right here. So the first one is that it's very important that NDCs include signaling elements. These, of course, are the overarching targets of emission reductions, but they could also be other type of sub-goals that can really send clear and long-term policy signals that give the investors and all the other actors that are part of implementing NDCs confidence in the direction of travel. A second very important element is for NDCs to be accompanied by actionable pathways. And these would be a bit longer documents that really set out all the steps that an NDC would need to go through in order to be implemented. This can include, for example, implementation plans, financing strategies, sector roadmaps, and so on. These are really important elements. However, what we saw in our analysis was that a very small percentage of countries actually have those ready and, above all, publicly available. Only 16 countries out of all the ones that we have analyzed had these strategies in place. But talking to MDBs, talking to the private sector, and talking to other stakeholders that we have interviewed in the context of this project, we really found that actionable pathways were the number one document that these actors were looking into, or were trying to find for any given country to understand what the role would have been in that country. And the third element that we looked into, and that any NDC setup should have, is clear enabling approaches. So have established clear governance arrangements, inclusive processes at the country level to make sure that the NDC is in the first place designed in a way that takes into account the views and priorities of different stakeholders, but also as we move into the implementation phase, to make sure that there is enough institutional coordination, stakeholder engagement, or other sort of approaches that can really make sure that the stakeholders are taken on board throughout the implementation process. What we did also in the report, in the final chapter, is to look at what are the financing options, the financing pathways that countries can take to then implement and finance the climate action that is set out in the NDC. And we identified 3 separate pathways with granular policy recommendations that could help inform financing strategies across different countries. And I'm happy now to speak about these 3 different pathways. If I can get to the next slide, please. So the first pathway that we looked at is about optimizing public finance. In other words, doing with what countries already have, but doing a bit better. I think we heard from the welcoming remarks at the beginning of the session that even though private finance will have to play a very important role in financing NDCs, at the end of the day, public finance remains a bit the backbone of financing climate action domestically. And there are a few actions that countries can take to enhance the use of public finance in this context. In the report, we go a bit more granular on all these recommendations, but just to mention a few, we talk about the importance of embedding NDC and climate action into national budgets to make sure that whenever countries plan their budgets, climate priorities are taken into account and a certain share of public finance is being earmarked for climate action. But also another important tool in this context is the tools such as carbon pricing or green bonds that can help raise additional resources for financing climate action. And then also, of course, importantly, the need to phase out fossil fuel subsidies or any other subsidies that take away public resources from where it's the most needed. If I can get to the next slide, please. I will talk about the second pathway that we look at, which is about redirecting private finance. So, of course, public finance is the backbone, very important, but we need to get the private sector on board with more effectiveness. And here there are very different things that governments can do in this sense. On the one hand is the use of public finance more strategically to incentivize private finance investment. And this can be done, for example, through the use of blended finance and other sort of financial instruments such as guarantees that can really help de-risk private sector investment and make sure that the private sector is ready and more willing to come in. But there is also then a whole set of regulations and policies that can help in this context as well, which can range from disclosure frameworks, or also incentivizes or helping or pointing the private sector to the need of adopting climate risk disclosure requirements so that they themselves start to understand what is the incentive in investing in green action and climate action more generally. And if I can get to the next slide, it's the third pathway that we look at, which is about strengthening international support. And this is particularly vital for countries with limited financial and technical capacities, which even if they would invest in public finance and private finance policies, they would still greatly benefit from international support. And here there are a few different areas that we looked into, which is, first of all, making sure that these countries have better and more efficient access to climate finance, and especially to climate funds, which right now is a very fragmented landscape with very strict and long access requirements, which make it very difficult for some countries to access this funding. But also one other important part that we look at is the importance of climate platforms and how they can really be effective at bringing different stakeholders together and connecting the financiers to the right opportunities in countries. And so it's an area where potentially over the next couple of years that the attention should really focus on. So these are the three pathways that we talk about in our report. It's very important to not see them as separate set of actions, but they really work in an integrated way. And there has to be a very good mix of policies that address all these areas in order for NDCs to be able to be financed as effectively as possible. If I can get to the next slide, please. So this turns to my last slide. Of course, I try to very quickly walk you through a report of over 100 pages. So I invite all of you to have a look at the report itself for more granular lessons or for more granular recommendations. But what I can say as a key takeaway for you at the end of this presentation is that, first of all, what we show is that ambitious NDCs do deliver measurable economic and resilience benefits. However, in order for these ambitious NDCs to be implemented, it's very important that the NDCs are accompanied by detailed financing strategies, because they are really critical to attracting investments. And we can see that countries are not investing enough in developing these financing strategies for the time being. And then to make sure that the NDC is able to be financed in an effective way, governments should really work on these three key areas, which is about optimizing public finance, bringing in more consistently the private finance and the private sector, and also making sure that international support is as strong as possible and as effective as possible in supporting those countries that need it. With that, I conclude, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Chiara. great to see this very important report and the very important insights and key messages that this report, which is evidence-based, delivers. So we also invite everyone to look at the report in more details. Let's move on now to the next two speakers from GEGI, also to give us an overview of the work of GEGI on NDCs and how we're moving from NDCs to NDC investment plans and NDC implementation plans, as was highlighted already from the previous speaker, and also hear about an upcoming publications on a guide incorporating macroeconomic and finance issues in climate planning. So I will give the floor to our colleague Diana Quesada, who is a senior policy analyst at the Center for Thought Leadership and the one who is leading the work stream on green jobs and green skills. Diana, over to you.
Thank you. If you can help me showing the slides, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, there we go. So as Estelia said, I will talk to you very briefly on how GGI is supporting the enhancement of NDCs and how we are making this support in order to facilitate the transition from climate policy and planning into actual investment and action. So when we go into any policy assessment that at the end of the day will mobilize finance, we always consider the four main issues on climate finance that we have now. The first one, as my colleagues from the UNFCCC and the OECD already mentioned, it's that the new target on climate finance, the global target of 300 billion annually by 2035, it is achievable even under the current policy landscape. However, it's insufficient for the climate finance needs of particularly the emerging and developing countries. So as of June of this year, the NDCs that have been submitted, the climate finance that they have put into their NDCs, it's already 400 billion. So we have already exceeded this amount. The second problem that we have in mind to solve for when we develop policies, it's how can we close this green financing gap? We know that we have been increasing climate finance over the years. For example, from 2018 to 2022, it has more than doubled, but we need to more than a five-fold by 2030 in order to close this finance gap. So we need to have in mind if we are going to increase private finance, how we are going to better utilize public finance, and so on. The next barrier that we consider, it's how do we translate the commitments into action? And this is because there is a very big gap between the climate finance that it's pledged and the actual funds that are being disbursed. And out of every $1 out of every $4 are actually disbursed. And we need to consider that when we look into the list of bankable projects, for example, for the enhanced NDCs or any NDC financing planning. And finally, one of the key issues that it's rarely talked about, but we find the most when we support countries, is how we are tracking the spending. Most of the countries are now putting emphasis on their MRV systems, and we actually encourage them to also link the MRV systems into climate finance spending, because there is actually very few impact evaluations on how these climate finance is being deployed and how effective it is. So within the projects that we developed, we follow a 5-step approach in order to consider these issues. The first step is to ensure country ownership. And this is basically giving the leadership to the country, and we are just guiding. And in terms of investment, this is applicable because it allows us to better assess the conditionality. What are the public funds available for implementing the policy that we are developing, either NDC, NAP, LTLETs, and so on. The second step is to build partnerships. And we do not only build partnerships to develop the policy that we are working on. We also develop partnerships in order to ensure that there will be a private sector engagement since the very beginning of the policy development that can later take on the bankable projects. And this will also allow us to facilitate the coordination between implementation partners, for example. The third step is to integrate all economic sectors and all the other policies that a country has. In terms of policy alignment, this is important because it allows us to ensure that climate finance is embedded within the broader development stages. And it's not only for mitigation or only for adaptation, but it looks into the full development of the country. It also covers, for example, employment creation. It also covers loss and damage, and so on. The next step is to develop sound analysis. And this is very important because most of the time we need to go very deep into qualifying the details of financial needs in order to have a credible financial assessment and to allow for a better resource planning. And finally, we enhance the capacity, not only to develop further policy assessments, but also to get the institutions ready to identify projects that are bankable or to reach out to climate funds with project proposals or to going back to ensuring country ownership and building partnerships to reach out to the private sector. So within this year, we have had support for mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and gender and equality policies. And within all these policies, we develop products like list of bankable projects, NDC implementation and roadmap plans, climate finance planning, and also cost-benefit analysis. Just in this year, we have supported 6 countries in enhancing their NDCs, 17 countries in developing their national adaptation plans, 2 countries on LTLETs, 3 countries on other sectoral long-term strategies, and 3 countries in green economy plans or employment strategies and fiscal assessments. So in total, in this year, we have supported more than 15 countries. Of course, we do not only support in this process of NDC 3.0, we have also supported across the previous years in, for example, Article 6 readiness, on MRV transaction and transparency, which I mentioned it was very important, and other socioeconomic benefit analysis and climate policies. We don't do this alone because we know that translating policies into action actually requires partnerships. So GGI tries to partner with different institutions, either public or international. As you saw, our colleagues from the UNFCCC, OECD, IPCC, GIZ, UNDP, and so on. Each country will have different partners, but we try to get the best of technical, policy, and finance support for all the policies we developed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this overview, Diana. Then we can move to a quick overview of the upcoming publication from Basil Oberholzer, Senior Economic Officer and Regional Lead on Macroeconomic Analysis. If we can connect and have him online, That will be great. Who is going to give us
Thank you,
an
Stelios.
overview of the upcoming
hope you can hear me.
publication on macroeconomic and finance analysis into climate planning, which is very much relevant to the topic of this session. Is Basil online?
Thank you very much, Stelios. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you speak louder, please?
Me well?
Yes, yes. The floor is yours.
Very good. So thank you very much. You can already go to the next slide, please. So you see that as GGGI, we have a certain pattern where we contributed to thought leadership through our analysis that we do. So there's a series of reports that support the policymakers and development partners in strengthening the planning side of climate action. And in general, we can say that our team at the Center for Thought Leadership is very much involved in the preparation of NDCs and LTLEDs jointly with and embedded in the governments. On the one hand, we bring in our expertise, and on the other hand, these processes and analytical work in countries, it's those that inform our next steps of analysis and research and make this whole process better. Can you please go to the next slide? So related to this, we also publish our research in peer-reviewed journals, and we produce specific reports of case studies and applications of specific economic models, as well as guides that show users what models to use for what purpose, etc. Next slide, please. So these are examples of such guides that we have created for policymakers. It is about improving climate action planning from particularly a macroeconomic perspective. And the methods and tools introduced in these guides shall help those plans and strategies to be economically consistent and to bring them closer to implementation. Because as has been already said several times, we all know that there is a gap between planning and implementation, and we need to bridge it. And a key aspect in do so is emphasizing the issue of finance. And this is why I would like to talk a bit more about this particular guide that you see on this slide on the left side, that is called Modeling the Green Transition. Next slide, please. So this guide, which will be published very soon and for which we are planning to have a soft launch at the COP30, it targets policymakers, implementation partners, donors and researchers alike, and it provides a systemic approach to assessing the key linkages within this complex system around the cornerstones of climate, economy and finance. And in this guide, we provide the tools that are necessary and useful for each subsequent step to do this analysis and planning. We know that, for example, the economic activities drive climate change, but can also contribute to climate change mitigation. We have climate change that affects the economy, and then we have finance, which is what shapes economic activity and which is the key to hold when we want to achieve climate action at a very large scale. And this is what we want to inform policymakers with, and for which this guide can be very useful. Next slide, please. So the guide unfolds along an inclusive governance structure that includes the relevant ministries in a country as well as other related players. And it follows a list of key principles, which are, in addition to the country-driven process, a flexible and context-specific approach that selects models and methods that are relevant for macroeconomic analysis according to a country's needs. Also, further criteria are the evidence-based decision-making, climate-informed economic planning, and obviously also equity and inclusivity from a gender point of view and social inclusion point of view. And also a cross-sectoral cooperation, because this is definitely cross-sectoral and interdisciplinary. So even us as economists, we need to grab the information from all the specific sectoral experts. Next slide, please. As the key part of this guide, let me quickly go through its main stages. It starts from the governance structure and coordination, then goes to the assessment of a policy landscape in a country, then establishes the integrated macroeconomic analysis framework that includes mitigation, adaptation, as well as loss and damage aspects. So this is where our tools and methods are grouped around these key aspects. And then these analytical parts are linked to the financial analysis before we go to the preparation of initial implementation and monitoring steps. We have a set of tools, as said, that are documented in a parallel technical report such that we can contribute to enhancing climate planning and bringing it closer to implementation through a systematic approach also to the question of finance. As mentioned, we are going to launch this report very soon, and once it is out, we will be happy to distribute it to everybody who is interested and to engage further. Let me close at this point and hand it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Basil, for providing these insights. First, let's say, teaser of this upcoming publication, which is very much relevant. And let's move now to hear from the country's experiences and how governments addressing the issue of finance and how they plan to move from planning to finance and implementation. And I will turn to our first panelists. Mr. Billy Katontoka, who is a national coordinator at the Ministry for Green Economy and Environment of Zambia. With nearly 15 years of experience in sustainable finance, Mr. Katontoka has dedicated his career to developing innovative financial products that support the transition to low carbon and sustainable economies. It's a great pleasure of having you here. So I would like to ask you, given Zambia's NDC, which is ambitious, how your government is planning to mobilize investment and private finance, de-risking investments on climate adaptation and mitigation, and making those bankable and attractive to private finance?
Thank you so much for that question. First and foremost, maybe just for clarity's purposes, I just want to also acknowledge Diana for that elaborate presentation that she made earlier on. We forgot to clap for her. Can we clap for her as well? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No worries. With regards to how Zambia is de-risking and making climate investment bankable, one thing that we've done is we've taken some deliberate steps, and those steps are that we've stopped treating de-risking as a donor function. We now treat it as a design function. That means that at the start, we de-risk. De-risking begins in how we build a project, not in who guarantees it. I mean, you must be asking, what does that mean? That is a lot of gibberish. Well, practically, what that means, 4 things I would like to leave with you. First, we are in the middle, like for instance, a practical example I can give you right now, we are in the middle of creating a green securitization facility with a local bank that pulls renewable energy and agriculture projects into asset-backed securities in which investors already understand. The second one is that we are looking at, we tie every project to revenue anchors, like where an offtake agreement, say with a power purchase agreement, where cash flows are real and not hypothetical. The third one being that we are now turning verified carbon credits into second revenue streams, a kind of carbon yields. And the fourth one being we are promoting community ownership through mini bonds that keep social risk low and performance high. And I think on this one, I would love to probably dive a little bit better, more into how we are looking at turning community assets turning those community assets into investable products. So on this one, I think what we are now doing is that through government has given, by the way, I'm the national coordinator for the NDA, National Designated Authority for the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund. So basically, through the appeal that we put through the government, our treasury, they gave us about $500,000, which we're now using for community projects. We are in the middle of disbursing those funds to communities that are vulnerable to climate change. And we're now leveraging that to be able to start looking to say, we've now got data. With this data, we're able to go to partners and say, this is what we are doing. Can we leverage what we have done and attract more funding into the space? So basically that for us is what is working for us. So we are not begging investors to take charity risk. We are offering them designed resilience they can invest in with confidence by generating that data for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move to the next panelist who is connecting online. And so from Fiji, we have a panelist, Rekha Sharma, from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, who is a climate change mitigation officer at the Department of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. In her current role, she's involved in vast array of mitigation-related projects, policies, and currently ensuring the finalization and implementation of Fiji NDC 3.0. So, a question for, is she online?
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Riha. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thanks for joining. It's a great pleasure having you. And the Fiji NDC 3.0, it's very fresh. So we would like also to hear from you what is the government of Fiji approach on addressing this issue of mobilizing private finance while seeking investors to provide financing climate adaptation mitigation, and how your government is providing any de-risking in these investments to make those more attractive for private investors. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Bula Vinaka, everyone, and good evening from Fiji. So for Fiji, we have a Climate Change Act for our Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, which sets a legal mandate for climate action for Fiji and to provide guidance on funding mechanisms for implementation. The Act also aims to promote sustainable development and a net zero economy, requiring government to act on climate change and mobilize funds and finance for adaptation and mitigation. One thing Fiji has done is established trust funds that specifically funds climate-related projects and community relocation, which details how the country will finance its climate goals and integrate climate action into its budget and development plans. So Fiji has demonstrated a strong commitment to the Paris Agreement through NDCs, which outlines how countries' commitment to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So we have submitted our first NDC in 2015, the updated NDC in 2020, and this year we're going to submit our third NDC, NDC 3.0. And we're also going to have a Fiji's NDC 3.0 costed implementation plan, which will be done after we submit our NDC 3.0. And UNDP has responded to Fiji's request via NDCP for support in developing Fiji's NDC 3.0 costed implementation plan. So for the question, the Fiji Climate Finance Strategy 2022 to 2030 outlines investment priorities for climate adaptation and mitigation across 12 sectors. Developed by the Fijian government, the National Climate Finance Strategy serves as a national guide for channeling public climate finance to achieve Fiji's climate goals, including building a net zero economy by 2050. It also integrates climate actions from existing national policies such as the National Development Plan, National Adaptation Plan, and Low Emission Development Strategy, the LEDs, and prioritizes interventions through inclusive stakeholder consultation. The NDC investment plan has detailed elaboration of individual mitigation opportunities in terms of technical implementation and financing concepts. The NDC investment plan falls within the NDC and to a large extent are included in Fiji's NDC implementation roadmap and LEDs. In line with our NDC commitments in 2020, like I mentioned, we had developed the National Climate Finance Strategy and NDC investment plan, where National Climate Finance Strategy has 24 projects, ideas, and concept notes, and the NDC investment plans has about 31 project opportunities and concept notes. The National Climate Finance Strategy covers 12 sectors, thus the energy and transport sector from the NDC investment plan is included in the National Climate Finance Strategy. Also, we have electric vehicle network development, where Fiji transitions to electric vehicles had a slow start. The government starts to introduce tax incentives on electric vehicles and charging infrastructure back in 2018. However, the major change came in 2022 when the government decided to reduce the minimum threshold of charging stations to $50,000 from $100,000 in the year before, and at one point it was $500,000. In the same year, 2022, the electric vehicles import duty fell to zero. One private organization took the bold step and invested in electric vehicles and became a trendsetter and imported electric vehicles and set up charging stations around Vitilevu in Fiji. From them till now, Fiji has seen many other companies and organizations now investing in electric vehicles heavily, and we have seen several tour companies going fully electric. We also have Fiji Rural Electrification Fund, FREF, where 4% of Fiji's population do not have access to electricity. A further 2,900 households still rely on archaic diesel generators for power, which are expensive and environmentally harmful. And over 15,000 households use very limited solar home systems that only power 4 light switches and 2 power points. The Fijian government recognized the need for blended finance to leverage both the public and private sector investments to address underinvestment in grid-based rural electrification and over-reliance on fiscal budget to address these financing gaps. So these were some of the responses to the questions asked. Vinaka Vakalevu, thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us an overview of Fiji's, how Fiji government addresses the issue of mobilizing private finance. And we saw also both in the case of Zambia and Fiji, community finance is very important. And it is great to see, of course, the fact that you're moving already on climate finance investment plan and soon developing an NDC implementation plan. Let's move now to Qatar, and we have another distinguished panelist here with us in the room. So Mr. Mahmoud Al-Marvani from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change of Qatar, who works at the ministry as Assistant Director at the Climate Change Department. He studied in Doha, Qatar, and holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Qatar University, and he began his career in Environmental Impact Department in 2004 and moved to Climate Change Department in 2014 with its establishment. So it is great having you here in person, and the next question for you is what persistent institutional or governance challenges have you encountered in implementing your NDC, and how are you addressing them?
Thank you for organizing this event and invited me to participate in this panel discussion. Like many countries, Qatar has been building up its capacity to establish a solid and mature institutional and governance framework to deliver its NDC and other climate-related goals. In the previous NDC cycle, the NDC 2030 timeline was aligned with Qatar National Vision 2030, which facilitated the target setting and implementation process with key stakeholders. Qatar is strengthening institutional capacity through the development of project-level working groups, and we conduct capacity building to relevant stakeholders. Regarding challenges, we see that reliable data and analytical capacity are essential for tracking progress, assessing impact, and informing evidence-based decision-making. This is an area of improvement, which is why we are working with GGGI on a web-based MRV system, which would enhance transparency. In closing, even though Qatar benefits a strong institutional capacity, see room for improvements that we will continue to work on a national and international level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, it's interesting that you highlighted also, as our delegate from Zambia, the importance of MRV. I think all panelists highlighted this and the importance of data and analytical evidence base, and really providing to investors real cash flows, real impacts and cash flows, as you mentioned earlier. So I would like to have a quick round to our panelists, just if you will be able to give us the two most important factors of success for moving from NDC or climate planning to finance. So which are the two success factors really to mobilize the necessary finance for implementing the NDCs? Just very briefly, because we are running out of time, so just to the key issues.
Thank you so much, moderator. I think for Zambia, and personally for myself, is what the ambassador earlier mentioned in her opening remarks. Trust is the real currency. It's not the actual money. What will come if there's trust between partners? That unlocks the avalanche of resources. Out of it, I can give a quick example. Recently, 2 weeks ago, the NDA launched an EV Zambia partnership. We didn't have enough resources to buy many electric vehicles. I had enough budget to buy one. I bought one, invited the CEOs of different banks and institutions and developing partners to come to the launch of the EV Zambia partnership. At the end of that launch, one developing partner approached me and said, look, I'm very impressed with your tenacity. I'm going to give you $100,000, which has made me to buy additional 3 more vehicles. So that, because of trust, because of seeing the willingness to go a step further with little, it allowed me to attract additional resources. So trust is the real currency. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's move to our next panelist. Mrs. Sharma, are you still with us online? Can you hear us?
Yes. Sorry.
Just also from your side, your experience, what are the 2 key factors moving from NDC to the actual implementation?
Okay. So first of all, it would be to have a strong policy and institutional frameworks, because when our country has clear climate policies, good laws, and strong institutional framework, the investors, they feel confident to put money into the NDC projects. And the second one would be the government may work with banks and other international partners to raise funds, and tools like green bonds, climate funds, and blended finance can help bring in more money through NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you. That was clear. We heard before also about strong policy signals from previous speakers. So it's also from Fiji's government perspective, that's very important. Again, to the president. So turn to Mr. Marvani for your two key success factors moving from NDC to its actual implementation.
I will say the key word here may be the cooperation. The two factors, it will be two levels. As a national level, the cooperation between, for example, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and our stakeholders, because we are, as a ministry, we are regulator, but the implement, it's depend on our stakeholders. So this cooperation, it will be really the main issue to implement this NDC. Other level, it's the international level. We are, as a developing countries, we need money cooperation with international agents. We need them expertise. We need them capacity buildings programs and others. So I will see the cooperation between everyone will help all parties to deliver NDCs.
Thank you very much with that. Again, the issue of partnerships, both in the country, at the national level, very important. The ecosystem for moving from the climate planning to actual implementation of climate action. And of course, the international partners and agents that could support this process through capacity building and other support, very important issue as well. So I think I would like to summarize and close this session. So thank you so much for your insights. I think what we heard in this session is very important at this stage to move from climate planning to implementation. We heard about the importance of evidence-based, showing the economic case of NDC and also long-term strong policy signals that could provide the trust to investors to mobilize finance on climate mitigation and adaptation measures. Trust, partnerships with stakeholders, both at the national and international level, MRV systems, data, evidence-based, that was also very clear emphasis that was given by multiple speakers here. And I think with that, I would like to thank again the panelists and everyone online and all of you for attending this session. And a big applause for all our speakers.